lines. Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here that I picked up recently from a local hunting supply store. So this is obviously a buck knife. This is the hiline, and let's get into it. So, got a cardboard box, which I like. We have message from, what is this? Warranty card. There we go. And I don't know. Chairman of Buck Knives. Cool. Company credo, something along those lines. We have a dog poo bag, which not the hugest fan of in the world, but I will live with. And then we have the knife itself. First thing to note is this is actually quite heavy, but oh, that's nice. So we have a frame lock with this G10 overlay over stonewashed steel frame. This, I'm assuming this is a stonewashed copper by the feel of it. Back spacer, and you can see all the hardware is also this copper, which I quite like. And then as far as immediate blade shape, we have it's a cleaver or sheep's foot shape. It has a continuous arch along the spine, which I quite like the look of. This one has the number designation of the 263, and it has a hole in the blade, very, very reminiscent of old school cleavers, where you have your smith put a hole in the blade so that you could hang it on the wall in your kitchen or workspace or butcher shop. Is it going to be heavy enough? Well, it needs a little bit of assistance, but the blade is actually heavy enough that it will drop down without too much of a pain. It has a quite well done, in my opinion, like just immediate thoughts, but it is a deep hollow grind, and you've got this nice choil that you can actually choke up on fairly easily. It's not a straight sheep's foot either. It's a little bit of a modified sheep's foot. It has just a little bit of belly to it out near the end, which, depending on what you think, may or may not suit you. I actually really like this shape. I think it looks really good. I'm not a huge fan of where they decided to put the Buck logo. I would have liked it a little bit further back or hidden, but it's not a bad look by any means. It has this interesting pocket clip. So the pocket clip, it's a one-position pocket clip, but it's mounted underneath this G10 onlay there. So you can see you'd actually have to take the onlay off before you can take the pocket clip off. I don't know why you'd want to take the pocket clip off. And this is interesting. So it's not quite deep carry, right? Like it's very deep, but it's not the deepest carry possible because this part of the handle actually ends up sticking up higher. So the end of your deep carry pocket clip is in line with sort of like the top edge of your lanyard barrel, which is just interesting. This is quite heavy. Like this is comparable to a Buck 112 in terms of weight, which is, maybe it's not quite that far. It's a little bit lighter than a Buck 112, but it's not, this isn't a light knife like that. It's gotta be copper. That copper backspacer is adding quite a bit of weight to it, which for a blade that is, it's a hollow grind, obviously, but it is still fairly thick and a fairly heavy feeling blade. A lot of the weight is in the upper part of my hand, which is actually making the blade feel a lot more nimble than I think it would be otherwise, which I like. I'm not particularly concerned with all of my EDC stuff having a minimal weight. I like to carry brass and I like to carry fun things like that. So for me, a little bit of extra weight is not the end of the world. You've got a fairly large amount of jimping right here where your thumb goes in a sort of standard grip, which is quite nice, You have, like I said, a choil here, enough room to comfortably put sort of your lead finger. Man, that's a nice stone wash. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but it's got a nice stone wash, and then there's a little almost fuller leading to that hole in the blade, which I'm liking the little aesthetic points. And the brass finished, or the copper finished hardware over this. Aesthetically, I really, really like this knife. It's got a manual action. Like I said, it's not quite drop shut, but it's pretty close. Can I get to that pinky flip fuller? Pinky flip fuller? Oh, not quite. I can get it with my ring finger though on my right hand, so that's interesting. Definitely not what I would consider to be a main way of deploying the knife, but it's got this nice flipper tab right there. It has cutouts for sort of like almost stop pins by the looks of it, you can see up there, but there's no stop pins to go into it. So it's just a interesting little feature of the knife handle. Is this running? Oh, it's got to be running off bearings. There's no way this is running off of washers. Yeah, it's got ball bearings in the pivot, which is quite nice. Does it mention if it's a USA made bug? No, this is a Chinese made bug. Not particularly surprised by that. As far as the factory edge is concerned, yeah, I mean, you can see that's the hollow grind is going to end up doing a lot for it. It's not quite going to be enough of a slicing razor for me to, not quite enough for me to do the wavy thing. You can see I was tearing at the end there, but in just a straight line, proceeds to tear it on the end of the choil instead. So in just a straight line cut, like that's pretty good. It is a little bit heavy. Like the more I'm manipulating this, especially compared to other knives in its size range, it is a little bit heavy, but not uncomfortably so. And I at least find the weight to be very reassuring. Also, something that I just noticed, this little cutout there that I mentioned looked like it was for stop pins. You can actually see it forms a continuous arch, or at least it feels like a continuous arch for my finger. So when I go to flip, it's actually already comfortable just to rest the end of my finger and then pull back, which not going to make the biggest difference in the world, but it is quite nice. Man, that is one of the better buck actions I have built in quite a while, to be honest. Like, they nailed this flipper. It has, I don't know how to describe this aesthetic. I really like it. I like having the buck logo on the copper there in the pivot. I think that is really, really slick. The only thing aesthetically that I do not love about this knife, and I do mean love, like this is perfection aesthetically for me. You know, there are blade shapes I like more, there are this, that, and that I like more. But under the principle of wanting to make a folding cleaver, I don't think you could do a better job. Except for putting the buck symbol somewhere a little bit more discreet, but they didn't do that. Something else that I am actually finding is that I can grab this knife quite hard, and I am not noticing this pocket clip at all. It's a very, very simple folded pocket clip. You know, it just goes up at the end, but I'm assuming because it's so far forward, it is fitting right here in the crook of my hand, and I actually cannot feel this. Even if I were to do this, like, other things are showing up as hot spots long before I'm noticing the pocket clip, which I like. The onlay on the reverse side means that it's actually very difficult to put pressure on the lock bar, which, you know, I am a fan of. This is very, very quickly becoming one of my favorite budget buck knives. So real quick, some size comparisons. Here it is next to the Civivi Chevalier and the Wii Banter. As you can see, it is quite a bit larger than the Wii Banter, but quite a bit smaller than the Civivi Chevalier. Not quite a bit, maybe a quarter inch smaller than the Civivi Chevalier, putting it very, very comfortably in sort of mid-size knife territory. But as you can see, it has a lot less sharpened edge, like half an inch less sharpened edge than the Chevalier. In fact, just real quick, it's got to be pretty close to the same amount of sharpened edge as the Banter. So, not lots, but not the smallest amount in the world. Here it is next to the Buck 110, and as you can see, it is a good deal smaller than the Buck 110. And finally, up against a Zippo. it's pretty comparable to a Zippo. Actually, this is interesting. I've got a 112 here to compare it to. It's got a handle size very similar to the 112, I think. As far as its size, its thickness, it's quite a bit. It's a little weird because the thickest point is actually on top of the onlay, and at that point there, it is very, very comparable to the Buck 110 in terms of thickness. Like, it's not identical, but it's a fairly thick knife. Yeah, it's a little bit thicker than my Zippo. I don't know if you can tell that right there, but it is a little bit thicker side to side than my Zippo is. That's a very crisp feeling action. Sorry, I'm just playing with it, but that's pretty nice. And I love the look of this with this fuller groove going down the back, and there's lots of little aesthetic things that I just really, really like about this knife. I got it to be a user. I do intend to carry this relatively often. It's quite comfortable in the hand. Oh, blade steel. Doesn't say on it. Does it say? It does not say anywhere what the blade steel is. I am going to go out on a limb and say it is most likely Buck's very, very famous 420 HC. They do the best job with any 420 that I've ever seen in my life, quite frankly. It's really, really good blade steel. Well, that's not true. It's a very, very acceptable blade steel in a more budget space, done to its absolute limits. This is the best version of 420 HC that I've ever seen in my life. But I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, because I do know they do some of their Chinese knives in, I think it's 7CR or 8CR, somewhere along those lines, which I think I would be a little bit less happy with. I do hope it is the 420 because, like I've said, Buck does an amazing job with their 420, but it could very, very well be their 7 or 8CR. I think it's 7CR they use. I don't have any experience with the Buck 7CR, so I don't know what I think about it yet. So it is going to see pocket time. I'm going to be able to play with it a little bit, and I'm going to be able to figure out, if it's acting the same way that my 420 HC Bucks usually do. I do think if you like the aesthetic, like, this really and truly is a user based around its aesthetics. If you like the aesthetic of it, I do think it's an easy knife to recommend as a result of that. But I don't necessarily think that everybody should go out and buy one. It's a sheep's foot blade is nice, but it can be a little bit specialized. You don't have a point to use, so if you're doing something like cutting open feed bags all the time, or I don't know, particularly pointy requiring tasks, it can be a little bit trickier or more awkward to use a sheep's foot blade. It's not by any means the end of the world, but that is in the sphere of influence. I personally really like it. Instant thoughts on it. I do really, really like this. Other thing to note is this cutout right here. When I'm holding it, it's actually subtle enough to act almost like a finger groove, so I don't feel it in my hand at all, but it makes accessing the lock bar really nice and easy. It's just the right amount of cutout, I think. Anyways, as I was saying, I do think it's a recommendable knife. If you are interested in this aesthetic, it flips great. So I'm going to say, yeah, this one here would be worth picking up. Stay safe, have fun out there, peace.